Are you a fan of the finest up-and-coming filmmakers that Scotland and the rest of the world has to offer? Then look no further than the Glasgow Film Festival. Glasgow short film. That Scotland and the rest of the world has to offer? Then look no further than the Glasgow Film Festival. Shit. It's a bit tatty, is it not? Look no further than the Glasgow Glasgow Short Film Festival. I'll do that again, but the list for. You told me that this was a trailer for the Glasgow Film Festival. I shouldn't be doing this. Glasgow Film Festival, yes. The Edinburgh Film Festival, I push. But the Glasgow Short Film Festival, no. You listen to me. It's just diddy wee films. Things about your granny or your drunk dad. Guaranteed there'll be some foreign animation that nobody understands. That'll be winning a prize, don't you worry about that. Are you a fan of the finest up-and-coming filmmakers that Scotland and the rest of the world has to offer? Then look no further than the Glasgow Short Film Festival 2021. Could have a lick of paint.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this live Q&A for Scottish Competition 3, Care to Express. My name is Sanne Jehoul, and I'm very happy to welcome all the filmmakers in this programme. Luke Fowler, Director of Patrick, Robbie Singh, Director of Forest Floor, William Hongxia Wei, Director of Green Thoughts, Izzy Gibbs, Director of Keep Water, and Will Hewitt and Austin McCowan, Directors of Harmonic Spectrum. Hi, welcome everyone. This is a program of films about art, creation, passion, and care. If you haven't seen the films yet, they are available on demand at our festival hub until the end of the week, and you can vote for them until Sunday at 4:30 p.m. If you have any questions during this Q&A, you can tweet them to @GlasgowShort, or you can email questions at questions@glasgowshort.org. And if you're watching this stream on Facebook, you can also leave questions in the comments and we'll pick them up there. And I'd like to thank Louisa McDade, who is providing the live captions for this session, and Polona Kuzman, who is running the live stream. So yeah, thank you all for being here. We'll kick off with a general question for all of you to briefly talk about the genesis, the sort of origin of your film, where your process or idea for it started. We'll go in order of the program, and then I'll come back to you for specific questions. So Luke, if we could start with you about Patrick.
Yes, I've been a huge fan of Patrick Cowley and Sylvester's music since I was a young man going out clubbing in the 90s. And when I had the opportunity to do a residency in San Francisco, the Headlands, I thought I would try and meet some of the Dark Entries people that been putting out Patrick's music recently, in particular his porn soundtracks that he did for gay porn films in the 70s and 80s. And yeah, so I met Josh Sheon and found out about the diaries that he had written, and that was really exciting. And so we sort of talked about maybe making a film about the diaries, and then I interviewed Maurice Taney, and that ended up becoming the sort of core of the film, this interview with Maurice, and obviously a lot of material that I shot in the Marin County part of San Francisco.
Thank you. Robbie?
Yeah, hi. So Forest Floor was made in 2019. It's really one of the outcomes or outputs of a long-term collaboration with an performance artist called Julie Cleaves. We both work in dance and performance. Julie's disabled, uses an electric wheelchair, I guess we've been working for quite a few years now on choreographic explorations around access and just spending time and sharing space together in places that to us are kind of adventurous. So this was all shot in Nethy Bridge in the Cairngorms where I live, in the forest. And effectively it's about getting into these places and spaces using quite unusual DIY measures to access being able to sit down on the ground together and then get back out of the forest. And it was commissioned by BBC Scotland and Lux Scotland, now and Next.
Right, thank you. William?
Yes, to begin with, I wanted to tell a melancholy story about a brief encounter between two young girls during a journey in the summer, and they came to the same place for different purposes, and each of them definitely had their own past experience. Then they met, and then they might have a passing infatuation, and finally an emotional farewell. And in terms of how to structure the story, two different rooms in the same hotel are very important. As a matter of fact, my visit to a few galleries in London and Vienna was a rich source of inspiration for my creation. And when I was preparing the scripts, I was thinking that was it possible to make the hotel rooms look like a gallery? Different rooms have its own paintings, like most hotels everywhere in the real world. And yeah, galleries are always interesting places. And they are public, but they're also very private in the sense that each visitor standing in front of the same painting must feel and respond to that artwork in a very different way. So good paintings always have the power to evoke extremely private thoughts.
Thank you. Izzy?
Hi, hello. My video is a small little stop motion music video to accompany a track that my dad played on the guitar. It's called Keithwater, and that's a little river that runs by where my parents live, and it's where I ended up spending 5 months during lockdown after all my work came to a standstill. And it's the third little stop motion film I've made. I'm not just self-taught, so it's a passion project, I guess, and it was really fun to make. So.
Right, thank you. Austin, Will?
Hi, unmute. We're the co-directors of Harmonic Spectrum. Harmonic Spectrum is about Sean Logan, who uses the piano to navigate life on the autistic spectrum. It's an observational documentary, and it was commissioned through the Bridging the Gap scheme by the Scottish Documentary Institute. So it kind of looks at adversity and the importance of using a creative outlet as a way of overcoming adversity. And the film takes place in a very unique location that's based here in Edinburgh, which is the Pianodrome, which is an upcycled amphitheatre of made entirely out of pianos. So that often needs explaining before or after the film.
Well, you learned during.
Yeah.
Which you had made a film about before.
Which is how we met Sean, was through a previous film we made, yeah.
Cool, amazing, thank you. Luke, I'm going to come back to you with some more specific questions. First, if you can maybe talk a bit more about your decision to make a portrait of Patrick and in relation to, because you did this as part of a residency, but was the idea already there before this residency? Did you develop it while you were what time did you have while you were there? You know, like, can you talk about that initial process?
Yeah, I mean, I had previously made this film about Martin Bartlett, who's a Canadian electronic music composer who died of AIDS in 1993. And the film, for me, that film is a kind of media archaeology as well. I mean, because I make, you know, I grew up making music with a computer, and you know, generally most music is made with computers now, whether it's acoustic music or electronic music. It's the computer is an intrinsic part of music making. But I think I was interested in this sort of the early days of computer music, and before it really calcified into an industry, before things kind of became commercialized in that sense. So I was interested in that early period where things were up for grabs, and it was a much more experimental platform, and you know, and in a way, there's a lot of echoes with Patrick Cowley's story, because he was making this sort of early dance music, high energy dance music without computers, before the days of MIDI, the MIDI protocol, you know, with analog equipment and 4 and 8 track tape recorders. So it's very primitive. It was very homemade. But there's something about it that has this, I mean, there's this soul to it and spirit to it that has this longevity and prescience in how people make music now. And so, yeah, of course, there's this sort of, yeah, I'm interested, I suppose, in demythologizing figures that you know, people maybe are familiar with certain aspects of them, but not other aspects. You know, in the more complex, unpacking the sort of complex stories around mythologized figures or figures that have been forgotten in history. And I found myself in San Francisco doing this residency, and I wanted to make a film while I was there. So I started the research for this project, and I kind of thought it would be a bigger project, maybe you know, feature length or an hour or something like that. But I had a very little time in San Francisco, so I just had this opportunity to speak to Maurice, and then I had to go home, basically. So a year later, you know, we're in lockdown, probably about you know, April last year, around about this time last year, and I was looking back at the footage and wondering whether I could actually do something with what I had shot, and that's when I put Patrick together.
Yeah, and so it's interesting that you say that about it, you know, having initially envisioned it as a bigger project, because I think that interview with Maurice is so lovely, and it just feels so, you know, it just feels so perfect for alongside these images and what you're saying. And was there then, did you speak to anyone else that collaborated with Patrick or was close to Patrick? Did you have any access to other people, or was it sort of working with Maurice and that was it?
I didn't do any recorded interviews with anyone else, but I was speaking to a couple of his collaborators about doing interviews, and obviously, and also spoke to Josh from Dark Entries, who had done a huge amount of research anyway. But the thing about Patrick is that there's actually, you know, for people that want to find out more about his life and his story, you know, there's very little footage. There's no biographies. You know, there's a biography of Sylvester, who was who Patrick collaborated with on some of his biggest hits, you know. But there's very little about Patrick Cowley's life. So I was kind of working in the grassroots and trying to put together as much as I could in the time that I had. But my biggest sort of weakness was leaving San Francisco and not having access anymore to these people. Yeah. So, you know, you can sit on things and dream of bigger projects, or you can just make do with what you've got, and that's the beauty of short films, I think, is that they are fragmented. They're fragments. They're sometimes incomplete. They're, you know, transient, contingent, little gems. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. And I guess I wanted to also speak about, or maybe hear about, your choices in terms of the spaces and environments that you documented. You know, that Patrick obviously moved through and worked in, but I think, because aside from it being a vignette of him, I think you're evoking a sort of memory and longing for this place that was, you know, the center of countercultural activity and such a progressive hub. And so to me, it sort of, you know, looked at or kind of reflected the loss of his life, which was cut short, but then also this nostalgia for this place that had such importance and is so different now, you know. So I was wondering what your choices were in terms of the spaces you chose to capture.
Yeah. So a lot of the film is shot around places where you know, some of the clubs that Patrick would have played in, and the south of Market area, Folsom Street, you know, area in San Francisco, where all the sort of leather bars and the bathhouses, and, you know, Patrick's story is really what is completely interwoven with, you know, a story of gay liberation and sexual liberation and community. You know, you can't stress how important the sort of communal aspect of a safe space. The disco is a safe space for people, for minorities, and people of other sexualities and genders to come together, and that was, you know, the world that Patrick inhabited, and that's a world that's gone now and has changed radically. Obviously, San Francisco is now this sort of tech hub of America, and you know, has all these sort of Google headquarters and things like that, and it's you know, it's gentrified.
Thank you very much for that. Robbie, I would like to move on to you, and maybe you could elaborate a bit more about your practice and collaboration with Julie, because I think you've been working together for about 10 years now. But where did that start, and where has that taken you so far in landing with this project?
Yeah, so Julie and I met about 12 years ago at a dance audition in London. Neither of us got the job, but we sort of made a connection. And I was sort of fresh out of doing 1 year of training at the time at Laban, dance conservatoire, contemporary dance. And Julie had already done a foundation dance course. And she was really, really interested as a wheelchair user and dancer of experimenting with movement on the floor. And I kind of wish Julie was here really to tell you the story. It's much better coming from her, but yeah, for her, being on the floor is a big deal. Just the effort of getting there. And you know, it basically requires a mechanical hoist. It's like a kind of battery operated kind of mini crane that are often used in care homes, or don't know, you might have seen them in swimming pools and things back in the day. So, you know, for us to get down to the floor, first of all, involved sort of this process of getting a hold of hiring one of these mechanical hoists. Very expensive, very kind of clinical, cold, sort of disembodied kind of process of getting down to the floor to essentially do what is a very tactile, close, warm, intimate collaboration of contact and moving. And if extremely difficult to try and describe verbally how we move, so you kind of have to see the film, I think. But we're always in contact when we move together on the ground. It's all about weight, and it's quite biomechanical. So we'd spent sort of a number of years really very slowly with various performative outcomes working together in this way, and then kind of got pretty bored of being in dance studios and being a bit hidden away. And I think often theatre and performance can be that way, considering it's the kind of most immediate thing we have is our body. It's often sort of within closed doors, behind closed doors. And so I guess we, just through forming a really close friendship and being out and about around the city in London, I started to get much more familiar with her, like the sort of challenges of everyday life, and getting around on the bus and so on, access issues, and so it sort of the project became about getting outside, and it became about trying to find ways to get down to the floor and back up that didn't involve this mechanical hoist. So the initial sort of getting down was eventually conquered by using getting a crash mat down basically, and a couple of people to spot and just having a go. Unfortunately, that worked. And then I don't know if anyone's seen the film, you'd get it. But we eventually, another year or two later, found this way of getting back up by using lots and lots of blocks of wood, like about 50 blocks of wood, about that thick, like plywood. And if you imagine sitting down on the floor, leaning on one buttock, and I would slide in one piece of wood under the other one and then swap over, so on and so on. So it's a slow process of getting back up, but very, very lo-fi, very kind of primitive in a way, but very liberating as well, not having to carry around this huge, expensive mobility hoist. And just going on an adventurous spirit of trying to find new places to go together, to sit down and be in the park, green spaces generally. And that's just kind of that action of going to the floor and getting back up has really kind of been central, and it's kind of exposed a lot of issues around civic design and policy making and attitudes to the kind of privileged white non-disabled man being with an older disabled woman, and notions of what that relationship is. So it's sort of like an action that's very quiet, but it's quite bold, and it's sort of quite provocative at the same time, I guess.
Yeah, I guess in relation to that, I was wondering what about the choice and I think the importance of setting this particular piece in the outdoors, in nature, which is obviously much less accessible than even any other space, but is also removed, I guess, from other people and social spaces. So I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of physical access and maybe all aspects of access, we tend to think of urban spaces. They're very design, architecture focused, obviously. So that's sort of become a more and more ingrained of the social model of disability. And, that's been the progress. I think for rural areas, it's just not there. It's obviously not about trying to create concrete paths through every forest and across every beach or whatever. There are other ways, and I think there are exciting things happening in tech at the moment around that. But for us, as dance makers and interested in the body and moving body, it's about the tactile, embodied, cooperative, shared experience, you know, and how that might inspire other people, rather than try to find a machine that will allow you to do everything. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. I'm going to move on to William. So in your film, you're using various texts, poetry, and you start with a poem by Emily Dickinson. So I was wondering if you could talk about the choices of the texts you've used and how you shaped the film around them, or vice versa.
Yes, there is a Chinese writer in this film, which means that through this particular application, I was able to put various texts from my favorite writers and philosophers as much as possible. And as far as Emily Dickinson's poetry is concerned, I could find the similarities between my character and this poet. In my script, the Chinese writer was someone who had little interest in the concrete reality and who occupied herself in reading books, collecting words, and dreaming. Although she traveled to the other side of the world, far away from her home country to seek inspirations, instead of stepping outside of for a short while, she still preferred to lock herself in the room. So with such an image of a Chinese writer in mind, Emily Dickinson then became a crucial element for my film as a whole. I was thinking about Dickinson's well-known private life, which was extremely private and had little contact with other people in the real life. Although she came into contact with her friends mainly through letters. So it seems to me that the words on papers were the only way for Dickinson to maintain an intimate relation to the outside world. And apart from this point, I'm also very interested in a few thematic concerns across Dickinson's poems, such as death and nature. And in terms of how Dickinson's poems shaped my short film, concretely, I must admit that one of her poems was crucial for the film structure, and the poem is called I Never Saw a More. So please allow me to read this small poem to you. I never saw a more, I never saw the sea, yet I know how the heather looks and what a wave must be. I never spoke with God, nor visited in heaven, yet certain am I of spot as if the chart were given. So as a matter of fact, when I first wrote the script, I was taking some lines from this poem and then putting it onto the title of various sections of my script. So in this film, we see some white land and some ocean images and also those lovely purple flowers in the film.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I guess you create a very dreamlike atmosphere, partly also by distorting and manipulating your visuals. So I was wondering if you could talk about that from both in terms of the creative choice and the technical process of that.
Yeah, there are a few reasons why I needed to distort the aspect ratio of the cinematic image. So when I was preparing my script and I was visiting some galleries in London and Vienna, so I think that I was able to imitate, to copy some ideas of some of my favorite modernist paintings, from Impressionist to Post-Impressionism to abstract expressionism, because those paintings are very flat. Another reason why I distort the film's image is because both of my actresses told me that they wanted to look more slim on the big screen. especially when I was going to shoot a close-up of their faces. They kept asking, "Hey, director, are you able to make my face smaller?" And I think, okay, I can make your face smaller. And so I will actually having Picasso's painting of women in my mind. So from a theoretical perspective, it seems to me that we tend to believe that cinematography are able to create the illusion of three-dimensional space on the big screen. However, it is just a two-dimensional surface. And the problem is also that, do we really need to cinematic space similar to our everyday experience? Or that must an artwork reproduce the objective outside world? So if you look at some spaces in traditional Chinese landscape painting, you can find something very flat and distorted. And also in quite a lot modernist paintings in the West, who were influenced by the Oriental art, obviously. And in those paintings, yeah, you can find something very flat and distorted. And in terms of the technical approach, there are different ways for me to manipulate the image. I firstly use a lens for my iPhone to shoot those scenes, and then I distorted many aspects of those images in Final Cut directly. And apart from this, I also used various different chemicals formed at home in the kitchen and bathrooms, such as shampoo, soap, and soy sauce, to partly disjoint the 35 millimeters and 16 millimeter films. Yes, that's it.
Thank you. It's interesting. And I also, because you made this is, oh, it's a student film, or it's made in collaboration with Edinburgh University, where you're studying a PhD. So I was wondering if you could talk about how the film fits within your wider research.
Yeah, obviously there is a close connection between my practice of filmmaking and my academic research in film studies at the University of Edinburgh. I have been writing essays on Michelangelo Antonioni, Wong Kar-wai, and Alexander Sokolov. I particularly appreciate their films, but I also think it's very normal that you are influenced by what you like and what you have researched. Yeah, I'm actually thinking about the French New Wave directors. They can systematically refer to film traditions. But I'm also thinking that apart from film traditions, my research into both West and East philosophy and aesthetics has a really profound impact on my own thoughts. I have quoted Roland Barthes and Deleuze's paragraphs in my films, and I really enjoyed these two French philosophers' works. And you can see how Deleuze's 2 volumes of cinema books influenced my work. Yeah, as he mentioned, the perception image and affection image and recollection image. So this work, of course, is very dreamlike. And I'm really interested in making abstract thoughts effective and tangible in my field. And I believe in an experimental film's power to do this. Yeah.
Thank you, Gillian. Izzy, I am going to move on to you now. So you mentioned that it's, I think, maybe the only film in the competition that was made entirely in lockdown.
Oh yeah.
I think so. I'm like trying to remember now, but I think so. But you know, I think you can see that it's sort of full of love and invention, and you create, it's sort of this world that, you know, this world of escape in the middle of all that. So I guess I was wondering about the materials you used, because I think it was all found materials from where you're based. So I was wondering about the materials you used and found, and what the process was of shaping them into what we see.
Yeah, so it accompanies this tune that my dad wrote about the river that runs near our house. And just after like playing around with some wood, I just decided to pick up all the sticks from the river, and it kind of just took place from there. Like I started making a bird. I really like herons. My dad really likes herons. I thought it was a good place to start. And then I found this really big, massive pile of sticks that the river had all pushed together, and I just loved it. It was so good. It was all the big sticks and then all the little sticks and just naturally all just stuck together. And I thought, I'm going to make one of these. So I made one in my bedroom. It was like 1 meter by 1.5 meters, old drawing board, made curtains that went around it, blacked out the room, and just made a big thing of sticks. And yeah, it all came out of the river. And I just liked the idea of making something that was a bit more natural, and obviously couldn't go anywhere, so it made sense to use everything I had.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out in the film how much space it was taking up the entire.
Yeah, it was pretty small. I think I could go all the way around it, so it made it feel bigger.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall it was pretty small.
So how much time did you spend on it? Like how long did it take the entire?
I think
project?
it was about from start to finish, starting making the models and finishing, like putting it together, I think about 3 months. Like, I thought I was going to be going back to work, so I finished it off, and then work got pushed a little bit longer, so I could have kept working, but I think it was good to stop when I did. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
When we all thought it was going to be 2 months or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's nice because I guess because you're capturing, because it's about the river, there is a sense of sort of flow and movement to it in a time, in a moment where that really means, where time means nothing.
It was strange as well, yeah, because I then saw there's a bit in the film where kind of spring comes and it was noticing everything coming alive again, because I wasn't busy at work and I could go for walks and see all the flowers come out and everything. That was kind of nice. It had a bit of hope to it as well, which was good.
Yeah. And I guess about the music. So it was you had the music, and you made something to that music. Was that? I mean, did you speak to your dad? Was there a sort of process, or was it just like he was?
He wanted me to do something. He's an artist and he's an illustrator, and he gave me a bunch of his work that he thought, oh, maybe I can use, like do more sort of 2D thing and cut up some of his pictures and make a film out of that. And I was working away in Prague before everything shut down and before lockdown, and I was going to try and do something there, but I just couldn't get my head around it. And then when we all had to fly home again, when it all shut down, I went back to my parents and we spoke about it a little bit, and he liked the idea of the birds and everything. And yeah, I mean, we were living in the same house and he kept coming up, and I was shut away in my room filming all day. So it was kind of, we were sort of in it together, but tried to keep a bit of a surprise for him. And I think he was pleased with the end result. So.
Good. I've got a question for you coming in, but I'll come back to it. I'm going to move on to Austin and Will first. So we were talking about obviously the doing no harm panel you did earlier in the week, Austin, which was really lovely. But I thought for the people who haven't seen that, maybe you could both again talk a bit more about your relationship with Sean and how that developed, and sort of the process of you all working towards the same goal, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we were talking about in the Doing No Harm panel was there was quite a lot of documentary makers there. It was hosted by Hannah Curry, who's also a documentary filmmaker, and I think it was kind of to do with the relationship that you you have with the person you're making the film about, and how the two things are quite inseparable, really. You know, we met Sean when we made this film about the Pianodrome, the venue, and we started off as friends, and we are still friends, but like in the middle of all that, we've made a film together, and it does throw up kind of some just complications when you're putting your friend on screen and distilling them and what they've done over this. We made the film over, because Bridging the Gap, so it's part of this Bridging the Gap scheme, and we were kind of completely derailed by COVID, so the actual process of taking the film was allowed to go on much longer. It should have been completed in May last year, and we didn't finish it until January this year, so it was, you know, we had a lot more time to sort of have to work through all that stuff with Sean. And yeah, what had initially been like, don't worry, it'll be over in 6 months, turned into like another kind of 6 months after that we were still like friends and this sort of directors and subject kind of relationship when it came to showing him things in the film and collaborating in that way. So yeah, it was complicated.
I mean, did you have? I assume you did your own. You have got your own research and knowledge, but did you have conversations with him about, you know, how autism is often represented on screen and some of the issues that you can come across? Did you have, you know, what was that like to talk to him about that, and for yourself as well, you know, to sort of look out for how you're trying to capture it, I guess. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, most of the shooting days, Sean would always start off saying what he wanted to say, and it was always a process of just sitting there and listening and letting him say it, basically. And we would maybe a bit naively, we would just let that happen and then continue to film as if like that's what we wanted to do. But the actual final cut, a lot of what he really wanted to say is what made the cut. Like you go into a shoot day maybe just not with an agenda, but you know, you have to work and you have to action on it. Whereas, yeah, I think in the edit we just actually we could listen to it in a different light without thinking ahead, and then a lot of those things just made sense about what he was saying. So he just says a lot, so it was a matter of just distilling it down, basically.
Yeah, I think it was interesting that, because I remember on shoot days we would be like, right, Sean's gonna want to say some stuff about this, but what we actually think we want is this. And then I guess having the distance and the time, I guess, to like look at the edit in a different way and actually realize that the story we thought we were going to tell was going to be completely different. It allowed, yeah, as Will says, because I mean, Will was the editor, so he watched a lot of that material back, and then it was quite amazing how it, you know, when the way Sean speaks is very, he draws you right into what he's saying. He's very performative. He's a great musician, but also the way he speaks, he's really engaging and he's very eloquent. And I think what we did that was naive that Will mentioned was when we tried to question Sean and get him to answer the questions that we wanted answers to, it didn't work when he had to formulate it on the spot, because he liked to have a bit of time to think about it. And then when he had that opportunity to prepare, he came out with what he wanted to say. So it's kind of a different approach with documentary when you think you can sort of let someone get something out of the way, and then later on they will be more open, or it was just kind of the other way around.
Yeah.
And obviously you mentioned being affected by the pandemic and by lockdown. How much were you always in touch over that period? And what, you know, there's some stuff that obviously you've incorporated, but how long were you kind of out? And I'm also just curious because obviously there's the moment where he kicks his friend out, and how you then, you know, how that sits with you, Sam, being so close to it and having to document that from both sides.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool.
It was very personal, basically.
It still is.
Yeah. So I wasn't in Edinburgh, I was at my parents', but yeah, we found Anthony a place to stay, basically. That responsibility fell upon us, and we felt responsible to make that happen and help Anthony out. But also, we really didn't want that to seem like a divide or us taking sides. So we, we were just trying to be very understanding of it.
Yeah.
And I think as Anthony puts it in the film is the best way. And I don't know if I can swear at this time, but he basically says he doesn't hold any resentment over this because it's a reaction that's common to most people, is like getting locked in together when you had plans to travel Europe and suddenly you can't do any of that. It's obviously extremely stressful, and I think all housemates are stressful, but when you're not used to having a housemate, then it's kind of amplified.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that doesn't come across in the film, is they actually had a tour planned to go. They were flying out to Prague actually on the 17th of March, was it?
Yeah.
And their flights got cancelled in the run up to kind of lockdown happening, and they were actually away to go and tour around Europe, playing piano and trying to test out their music, as Sean puts it in the film, like doing the market research. They were going to go and jam kind of and play bars and stuff around Europe to see what they could do, and then that's kind of what the moment we find them in the film. And I think actually what you asked about is like, how much time do we spend with them? Not a lot, really. Like, really not a lot. We gave Sean a GoPro and another camera.
Yeah.
And they filmed barely anything. Like,
everything in the film is what they filmed over about 3 months.
Like,
they really didn't film over lockdown, so.
They kept calling us about these kind of interesting ideas, like, oh, we're going to go out in the field at sunset. And I was like, that sounds great, do that. And then it was like, didn't do it.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. There's a few questions that have come in, so I'm gonna get through those first, and then maybe see if you have any questions for each other. Robbie, there's a question from Tom saying, I was really struck with the editing, particularly the sound editing, with just the odd word or sigh included. Can you talk about that fragmentary approach?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, basically, I suppose trying to bring some kind of intimacy and get close to us, and try and let that communication that comes between us verbally as well as physically, just try and let that come out. It was pretty documentary, no scripts. I mean, there was a sort of idea of the physical actions we were going to do, but it was kind of let the camera roll and see what comes. So I think it was trying to just bring the audience as close to us and as close to the textures and the ground and the sound of the forest as possible, really, without doing too much.
Thank you. Izzy, I've got a question from Tanya saying, the way you talk about how you approach this film sounds very freeform and improvisational, which seems to be a contradiction in terms of animation. What impact do you think that approach will have on your work moving forward?
It was a pretty messy approach, I'd say. Yeah, I didn't really have any idea what I was doing, and ended up spending hours and hours getting a lot of footage that I didn't use. And then the story kind of came together after I was about, I don't know, like 3 weeks into filming. So I think next time I will try and plan a little bit better. I think that's the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Luke, I wanted to come back to you about the Patrick's music and the choices you made in terms of what music you chose to use in the film with your documentation. If you could speak about that.
Yeah, I had basically the run of all of his work that he had released on Dark Entries, rather than the more commercial music that was done. That was, when I say commercial, I mean I think Universal owns the rights to all the Megatone stuff now, so all of the albums that he put out during his lifetime were kind of out of bounds, but that didn't really matter. So because I think, you know, what I wanted to draw attention to anyway was this sort of unheard lesser known body of work that was the more experimental sort of you could call it ambient, sort of proto-ambient and percussive music that he did that was sort of influenced by people like Tomita and Wendy Carlos.
Thank you. And sorry, I've got a question for Austin and Will. Saying the film feels... Sorry.
Wrong.
Sorry?
T-O-M-I-T-A.
Cool. Austin and Will, I've got a question from Jenna saying the film feels very detached from your egos as filmmakers in the best way possible. Was that intentional, or did that happen because of Sean's character and presence?
Question.
Yeah, I mean, it's Sean's story we're telling, basically. I think there was a moment when in the edit, we had included us asking questions, and it didn't work. I think you need to, as the audience, you need to basically experience the film from Sean and be on his journey with him. And that just is generally what we do most of the time, is we do obdocs where we're not included, we observe, and we try not to ask too many questions, I think. We try and just let things unfold, apart from the very obvious interview setups.
But yeah, I think again, like what we were saying before, we did put our egos in when we were shooting it. And that's a little bit to do with the Bridging the Gap development process is like a 3-month program, and you're there with 11 other films, and you're all developing them, talking about it and receiving feedback and giving feedback on other people's projects. It's a really good experience, but inevitably you overthink it a wee bit. Yeah. And we definitely had overthunk it by the time we got the commission, and then it was actually really helpful in a way that COVID came along, because it allowed us to just reset, throw away the old idea basically, and then actually make the film that was already there and was happening in front of us. Yeah. So I think it could have been a little bit more indulgent for our egos if COVID hadn't happened.
Well, that was a compliment, so. Luke, I'm quickly coming back to you. I've got a question from Julie saying, why do you think you're drawn to making impressionistic portraits of artists and thinkers?
Why not?
Is it too broad?
The idea of, I suppose I've made films about communities of people and portraits of individuals, and I'm interested in making, for me, my work doesn't, when I make a film, I never went to film school, and I'm a fine artist, trained as a printmaker, and I have this sort of shadow life as a musician as well, or sort of, and so I just do things that are edifying and nourishing for my sort of autodidactic sensibility, and when you make a film, you know, all of the people in this panel could probably testify. You know, you have to live with the subject for a long time, and so you know, you want to live with something that you feel empathetic towards, that you feel that you want to embrace and embrace the values of, and you know, love, you know.
Yeah, that's a nice, I wish we could just entirely round off there, because I feel like that's sort of, you know, reflective of I think why we put this program together, why we put these films together, because it's about that.
It's not just a dry intellectual pursuit, you know, or something that sounds like it might make a good pitch in an elevator. You know, this is every portrait is a self-portrait. You know, these films say something about us as individuals, and and the values that we believe in and we want to communicate.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to, well, we've got 5 minutes, but I wanted to know if any of you had questions for each other at all. Don't feel pressured, but also don't be shy. Yeah. No? I can continue because I've got another question for William about the choice. Well, the natural environment being so key to your film, and the plant and flower motifs that run through it, and whether you can speak on that.
Yeah, it really has something to do with my background. In traditional Chinese culture, the dominant type of painting is landscape painting rather than portrait. So the appreciation of nature is very crucial part of traditional Chinese cultures. And in quite a lot of Chinese poems and paintings, it's very normal to find the general themes of human within the landscape and how the human's emotions, moods are connected to the natural landscape. And apart from the natural world, of course, plants are also crucial. As a matter of fact, the title of my films comes from an erotic short film made by a British filmmaker called Peter de Rome. He made the film Green Thoughts in 1972, and in that film, you can find close connection between plants in a botanical garden and the protagonist's sexual desires and fantasies. So, yeah.
What was the filmmaker called?
Peter de Rome.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
You can put it in the chat.
Yeah, I can type in. Yeah.
I maybe have a question for Robbie.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the film, but I mean, it sounds wonderful. And you said it's shot in the Cairngorms where you live, and I mean, obviously that's an area of kind of spectacular beauty, and it's an area that a lot of people go sort of climbing and hill walking in. But I wondered, as somebody that lives there, whether there's things, that aspects of the landscape that you are more aware of from being based there and from your observation of daily observation or walks, and especially in the forest. I mean, how different it is from the sort of the image that we have of it as visitors. It's a place, maybe it's a place to live. I know
the first thing that's come to mind is the amount of dog shit at the moment. Scale. And when you're trying to walk your 3-year-old around, it's, the locals love to pin it on visitors and tourists, but they can't just now. I don't know, it's like there's a lot of local, like land use, land ownership, all the stakeholders and the different estate holders around the area, and the farmers and the charities, RSPB and so on. Everyone's kind of got their own, I guess they've all got an interest. Everyone's trying to find a way to work together. It's extremely touristy. It was actually only just today, I think, the new local development plan has been published or approved for new housing and so on. I think it's there's a lot of that boring stuff going on locally, but
it must also be a difficult place to live in terms of like snow and isolation and being cut off.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty lovely this year, to be honest. It's quiet, a lot of snow and quiet. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. Like, I live in a village that's really like a high proportion of second homes and holiday homes, and it's been quite lovely, actually, to be honest, to be left alone a wee bit. this year. Shouldn't say too much, really. If anyone's watching.
Yeah, on that note, hopefully in person next year.
Thank you.
We're going to round up, but thank you all very much for coming online, for being here. And again, you know, I like wanting to be alone or not, I hope I can see you in person sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Very much.
Bye.